Good morning, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of AFRA, I thank you so much for making it to another edition of AFRA Sky Connect Dialogue today. In our session today, we would be looking at one of the valuable links to air connectivity, not only in Africa, but across the world. And this, we're talking about the travel agent or the travel manager. This role has actually evolved over time. And in our discussions today, we would be unpacking how this business link of aviation has continued to evolve and remain relevant to the aviation community, particularly airlines, passengers, and customers at large. We will be unpacking that. And in addition, we will be looking at how technology and innovation is changing the way travel is managed and the continuous relevance of the travel agency business in this whole puzzle. To help us do these discussions today is my very good friend, Mr. Nikanon Sabula. He is the Chief Executive Officer of Kenya Association of Travel Agents, simply called KATA, Kenya Association of Travel Agents. He's the CEO. And so Nick and I would be taking a deep dive into some aspects of the travel agency business, and we will try to discuss elements that makes this business entity so resilient, and going forward, why this business is going nowhere anytime soon. Throughout the discussions, ladies and gentlemen, as in previous sessions, remember you can participate in the discussions by either sending your questions through the Q&A tab or sending us your comments through the chat box. Intermittently, we will review these as we continue with our discussions, and if there are questions, we would respond to you appropriately. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome to the show Mr. Nikanon Sabula. Nick, you're most welcome.
Thank you very much, Raphael. Good to see you and good to join you in today's dialogue. It's quite been a while since we last had a chat, so I'm happy to be here. And thank you, to AFRA for the invitation to participate in this month's dialogue.
Great. Thank you so much. Before we actually get into the substance of our discussion today, I'm sure some of our guests probably do not know who Nick is and who KATA is and what you do for KATA. So if you can briefly just give us a rundown of who you are and what you do for KATA. Thank you.
Yeah. So thank you, Raphael. Again, just to reintroduce myself, my name is Nikanon Sabula. Some people know me as Nick Sabula. That will still work. And I'm the CEO of the Kenya Association of Travel Agents, KATA. I've been around, the travel industry for about slightly more than 10 years. I tell people that my background actually is in environmental science. So I'm a scientist by training who veered into the world of travel and tourism accidentally, but I found a lot of joy in doing the work that I do. I also wear a couple of hats. Currently, I also serve as the CEO on an interim basis of our regional travel agents association called the Association of Eastern and Southern Africa Travel Agents, ISATA, which is an umbrella organization that brings together National Travel Agents Association from 12 countries, running from Ethiopia up north all the way to South Africa in the south. So I help coordinate that from our office here in Nairobi, Kenya. I also recently got a chance to be appointed by our government to the Tourism Regulatory Authority as a board member, where I also represent the travel industry in the regulatory arm of the industry here in Kenya. So maybe just give you a brief of what KATA is, as the Kenya Association of Travel Agents. Fairly well known across the continent. We are a national umbrella organization representing travel agents here in Kenya, established in the year 1979. So this year we are celebrating our 45th birthday, and we represent licensed travel agents here. And among other things, what we do in our membership, we've got over 300 travel agencies, and we account for between 60 and 70% of all airline ticket sales here in Kenya. So like any other trade association, we do advocacy work on behalf of our members. We also represent them in various forums, both national and international, as well as literally do self-regulation of the industry and build the capacity and knowledge base of our members. So that's in brief what KATA is, and our role, in just promoting travel within the African continent.
Thank you so much, Nick, for that elaborate introduction. So you can imagine handling 60 to 70% of the airline's travel volumes. That is no mean achievement for KATA. And it just means it is actually the backbone of airlines operating into and out of Kenya, the dynamics notwithstanding. But Nick, let's step back a bit. You recall some years back in the early 2000s, precisely 2004, 2005, there was a wave that swept through this industry, and that wave was called e-ticketing. And this was seen as an impossibility in Africa. There was so much kick and push against it by airlines, by the travel agency community, by the passengers themselves, because we could not actually come to grips to travel without that carbonated paper. Today, it seems like that never existed. How has that migration been?
I usually tell my children that nowadays we just swipe our phones, going through the airport, and they don't believe it. But like any change, change is a difficult thing, to a human being, and change will always attract resistance. Now, you're talking about the 2000s, but I have a friend. A friend of mine, an old friend of mine, and I say old, this gentleman started selling tickets before I was born. So he always relishes me with stories of what running a travel agency looked like, in the 70s. And he tells me that one of the greatest investment you did as a travel agent was A, to invest in a very strong safe, and B, to also invest in a strong room, where your tickets, will be stored. And so, that process was very manual, laborious, and costly, very, very costly to both the travel agent and the airline. as well as inefficient, to a lot of travelers. And he tells me that woe unto you if you misplaced or lost your ticket, because it meant starting the process again. And all this time he tells me around the rush, just before the flights took off, they would rush to the airport with the paper tickets to go so that they can be authenticated. And so it's been quite a transition. And as you correctly put, we start the shift into the e-ticketing in the mid 2000, and nobody actually believed that actually we will have e-tickets. And start the process of automating even our back office systems, integrating our GDS systems, and it was a whole new environment. So we have walked a long journey to the place that now we are talking about going into a regime of paperless tickets, blockchain and all this new technology that we want to do, ticketing with. So it's been a fairly great journey. And you'll also recall the kind of resistance we particularly as travel agents had with the OTAs, the online travel agents, because we saw them as a threat to our business. And we couldn't believe, the Expedia and all these guys were going to start issuing tickets. That meant, that we're going to lose jobs. So I always joke, Raphael, that the eulogy of a travel agent was written way, prior to the turn of this century. And we've been waiting the death of the travel agent or the burial, but that has not happened, and it will not happen because we are here to stay.
Yes.
Yeah.
But that's so true. I mean, the whole industry did not give much chance to travel agents to actually metamorphose from one phase to the other. But it looks like this is a very resilient business. And each time technology or innovations come up, the travel agents also move a notch higher. Tell me, today, in today's system, because today, making a booking is actually in the hands of anybody who has a cell phone and is connected to the internet. You can make a booking on nearly all airlines. Okay? Now, but yet the travel agent is still a key component. And like you indicated in your introduction, 60, 70% of the volumes still come through the travel agents. What would you say is the relevance of travel agents in Kenya today?
I will tell you, the industry that I lead, has been one of those that have really faced a lot of challenges throughout the evolution of the industry. And we have also been fairly slow to adapt. And what I would tell you that the trick really has been in the ability of the travel agent to reinvent themselves and adapt, to the changing environment. There's a time we saw technology as a competitor, as an initiative that was coming to kill our business. But we have managed to quickly adapt. And so today, actually, technology has enabled the way we do business. And lucky enough, Raphael, I will tell you that our industry is such that it's a people industry. And because it's a people industry, technology is not going to replace those people-to-people relationship that actually exist. So what we have seen is a very quick evolution of the travel agent of yesterday from an intermediary. The travel agent of yesterday was an intermediary, bridging between the industry service providers and the traveler. And that evolution has then allowed the travel agent to also metamorphosize into what they're now calling themselves travel advisors. So it's no longer about, it's no longer about the travel agent being a bridge, but the travel agents become your professional advisor on your travel. And what better demonstrated this capability and completely changed the perception of the travel agent in the modern industry was COVID. You know, when COVID happened and people got stuck in different parts of the world, and even those that had booked, tickets through some of these OTAs, they tried making phone calls and they realized that they could not talk to anybody. And at that time, all you needed to do was a voice that would give the assurance that, you know what, we've got you covered. You know what, we will reroute you to this place. You know what, we are going to fight for you to see if we can get you some refund and redirect you and ensure that we get you home safely. And that, I think, is a metamorphosis that actually have allowed the travel agent to evolve and continue to be relevant in today's industry and in today's economy. And I think that particular role, we are going to see it get more strengthened because travel is also becoming very complex in its nature. You're talking about connectivity. You're talking about personalization and end-to-end services and very, sophisticated demands and requirements from the traveler. And who is going to provide that connection? It is the travel agent. So we are going to see a much, much, much more stronger role of a travel agent in the travel industry, actually providing very clear support.
So what would you say is the how many people, for instance, is Qatar employing in Kenya? And if you extrapolate that to Africa, how many would you guess would be the number of people that are kept in employment by travel agents? Would you? Hello, Nick? Hello, Nick. Yeah, I think I lost you briefly. Can you hear me?
Yes, actually, I can hear you. I can hear you now. So,
okay.
Yeah.
I was just asking about.
I think I lost you a bit. Just ask the question again.
Yeah,
you're talking about
I asked about how many people directly is Qatar employing in Kenya? And if you look at the African continent, what would be your guess of the number of people that have been kept employed by travel agents?
Yeah. Now, you look at the statistics, and I will give you, what is the most interesting element about our industry, and particularly the travel agency that I provide in, and I openly talk about this. In Africa, the our subsector, in the industry provides what I call a dual pathway to economic growth. You can either start by pursuing entrepreneurship, which means that you leave college and go and establish and start your own travel agencies and provide services. And number two, you can choose a career. You go and work in the travel agencies and pursue a career there. So when you look at it, I will tell you that this is an industry that is employing a tremendous, probably my members, as I look at it, we probably are crossing about hundreds of thousands of those, because typically you're looking at roughly, thousands of the travel agencies that exist in the country, and typically a travel agency will employ between 3 and 25 people. So when you do the math, then you realize that quickly that runs into hundreds, of thousands of people that are actually directly employed, and this cuts across the entire African continent. So you remove this subsector, and then you begin to deal with the issues of youth unemployment on the continent. So it's significant, Raphael.
Yeah. So now, considering this significant number of people that have engaged now, and the way technology is moving, in the past, there were strong distinctions between a travel agency and a tour operator. Today, it looks like that distinction is getting narrower and narrower. Do we still have that distinction? What would you say is the fine line between the two?
I guess the line is becoming thinner and thinner, just like the world is also becoming thinner and thinner, you know. Raphael, today you're interviewing me like a journalist. Something that a couple of years ago you wouldn't. This was a reserve of professionals that will do that. So I guess it's that narrowing in of just generally elements in the world. But yes, I think the line has become thinner and thinner, and of course because we have tour and travel agencies, that's what they call themselves. You find that they're crisscrossing, in terms of roles. But significantly, I think you realize that technology is enabling this seamless transition and harmonization of what we are doing. Because typically the old travel agent, what they will do is that they will arrange your ticketing and perhaps arrange your ground transport, and do your accommodation. When it came to the issue of now arranging tours, and that was specifically the role of a tour operator, right? But nowadays you're finding that a tour operator is actually able to issue tickets. Why? Because they have access, to a system that actually can issue tickets without the complexity that the old travel agents, used to go to. And I have people in the field that tells me, the blue screen. I think they call it the blue. Is it the green screen? You don't need that blue or green screen that we used to do and codes that you would put in to be able to issue a ticket. So that has made the transition from the tour operators become easier, in terms of accessing those systems. So yes, the line is becoming thin, but the work still needs to be done in terms of the professional input that the travel agent will provide.
Great. No, that is a very good response. I see myself that today is very difficult to actually say this one is the travel agent and this one is the tour operator, because invariably they interplay the roles. I mean, I'm sure if somebody walks into a travel agency office and say, okay, look, in addition to booking me a flight, I want you to book me a vacation to a particular destination and make X, Y, Z arrangements. I'm sure the travel agent will not say no. He would say, okay, I can do that for you. And even if he does not directly have the expertise, he knows the tour operator who we can team up with and provide a service, and so that the customer ends up being happy. But you talked about technology and how this is reshaping the industry and making things much easier, much simpler. One of the key innovations or technology drivers of this industry was what IATA launched a few years back, called the New Distribution Capability, NDC.
NDC, yes.
This is a very good tool that simplifies the travel process. I don't know where we are as a travel agency community in Africa in its adoption.
Fairly well. And Raphael, you understand the history better, that transition, into NDC. I think that conversation now is almost 15 years, right? Almost 15 or so years since we began that conversation. And you will recall that it was not a very easy conversation, when it started, with the airline and the travel agent and GDSs, having divergent opinions about what NDC, meant. But because I've observed the process over a couple of years, I will tell you that there are still concerns, but the entire industry has adapted and accepted that NDC is a future, right? You know why? Because when you look at how technology has evolved, you're talking about the deployment of AI, artificial intelligence that is now enabling, dynamic pricing. You're talking about the coming in of chatbots and personalization, and we talk about lots of ancillary services that actually are offering us opportunities to be able to sell much more than what we call, we used to sell bums on the seats. Now it's not just selling bums on the seat. We actually are able to sell much more offering that is providing opportunities for both airlines, the technology providers, as well as the travel agents to be able to increase, their earnings. So you're no longer just selling a ticket for somebody to sit on the plane, but you want to be able to meet their evolving needs and desires. So that has been extremely successful. As I've said, and I'll continue to say, it is a journey that is going to take a bit of time to be able to adapt. And unfortunately, also us within Africa, we are being left behind, in terms of the adoption of that NDC. You see how the application is done. It's a global standard. So you find that it's a global standard that sometimes forgets that there are certain parts of the continent that are still trying to catch up. So that global standard is not accompanied by sufficient capacity development by the end user. And that's where then you find that travel agencies in Africa will struggle to adopt that NDC because there's a lot of focus in the developed world than on the continent. And obviously because we don't seem to be a very significant market. But the NDC has really revolutionized and democratized the way distribution of content is happening.
Yeah, well, I think I agree with you, but you see, as a region, we always are the laggards. We wait until everybody has adopted any new thing that has come on, and they are moving on now about leaving us behind. And that is where we feel the pressure to join in. I was just hoping that technology is an equalizer these days. And with technology, when it comes, irrespective of where you are, Africa should always be in the lead to try and adapt and move on with the time. But unfortunately, we still have these challenges. What do you think is the issue? Is it our regulatory framework, or it's the way the business is structured?
No, I disagree with you, Raphael. It is not that we lag behind or we are resistant to change. All right. It's a dual factor, When you look at a lot of these technologies that we are adapting, they are not homemade technology. Okay, they are developed elsewhere and then deployed globally. Sometimes without attendant or follow-up capacity, but also when you look at the cost of adoption, it becomes very prohibitive for the continent, to be able to adapt to some of these things. Somebody develops a technology and they're selling it for $1,000. $1,000 may not be too much money for a normal operator, in your typical developed country. Now, $1,000 just to be able to buy that technology, but also to be able to retain and maintain that technology is a hell lot of money. And that's why I've always argued that there is need for us as Africa also to be able to create and develop homemade technologies that actually attempt to respond to the needs that we have. Because when it is developed from the home ground, then affordability becomes an issue that actually we understand. right? So there's been that challenge of the technologies are developed elsewhere and then globally deployed without understanding the local context. Are the people ready? Is it coming at the right price? Are they trained, to be able to adapt to that technology? And that thereafter comes with additional cost that makes adoption much more expensive for your ordinary, Africa user. So that has been, and that's why we need to push our own developers, our own inventors to develop local solutions that actually respond to our local problems. That's a very important element that we forget. Sometimes we beat ourselves too hard.
Yeah, that's true.
Yes.
I agree. I agree with you totally. Now, on the African continent, we have realized that invariably connectivity remains a major challenge. And we also realize that even the ability to acquire tickets, particularly on multiple flights, becomes a problem in some cases because not all airlines have interline relationship, or let me call it commercial relationship, that enable them to support each other in their operations. By the same extent, in fact, even among the travel agency community, because some airlines are not interlining, it becomes difficult for you to do through ticketing. So you have to sell independent tickets from A to B and sell a different ticket from B to C and probably a different ticket from C to D if the travel is on different carriers. Now, to address this problem, and in the wake of the single African air transport market, there has been a clamor call to find a solution that addresses this unique or peculiar challenge that confronts African travel industry. In this regard, there's a thinking, and AFRA is at the top of this, working on a travel solution that will sort of allow African airlines to be able to interline with an ability to clear their sales at some point, similar to what pertains at the global level. Do you think this will be a good solution to the connectivity challenge we have on the continent?
That's a very good question, Rafael. And it takes me back to what I was talking about in terms of domestic homemade solutions to our own challenges. So if we want to be able to build an African aviation industry that actually responds to the very local needs, there is need for us to collaborate. African airlines and then Africa operators, travel agents. We need to be able to look at what are some of the homemade technologies that we have that will allow that seamless connectivity between the different players. And I'll give you an example. You look at the IATA BSP and how many people it has locked out because of these global standards that they have. The pain that your typical travel agent will be able to go through to be able to be hooked on the IATA BSP. And that what has meant is that it has left quite a significant, number of players out of the distribution network that is available, which is then making airlines develop very costly direct channels, instead of that consolidation. Right. Now, if we're able to think through a locally homemade solutions, I don't see no reason why African airlines will be able to consolidate and be able to develop a distribution channel that understands the local context, brings in as many players as possible, it's consolidated and then integrated, then we can be able to plug in, with the other system. What does that do? It lowers the cost of access to those systems. Number two, it aligns itself with the local contexts and local understanding of the local issues. You know, one of the biggest challenges we have as Africa is the issue of our currencies. You know, we've got, I don't know how many currencies. So sometimes I want to sell, you know, Senegal Airlines and I have to use their currency, or go to sell Nigeria with the Naira and South Africa with the Rand, as Kenya here with our Kenya shillings. All right. Now, you look at how the BSP, our BSP is structured. It's either you're doing your local currency or you're doing the USD. And that for me provides the challenge. So we need to see the unity of Africa Airlines that actually is going to allow that interconnection, streamline distribution, and then enhance functionality and then reduce the cost of operating those systems. When we do that, then we are able to bring on board a lot of our domestic local players that have been locked out of the distribution channel that exists, the global distribution channel that disenfranchises them and also disadvantages them. They are unable to compete because of those obstacles. So, and that's why it's exciting to listen to this conversation that Afra is having, you know, with the Afra Exchange platform. I hope that will be the beginning of the creating that freedom, you know, for the Africa players to be able to grow our own aviation industry in a manner that we understand better, and taking cognizance of the local context of business.
Wonderful. That I like that bit. Yeah, it will be the beginning of African players, African aviation taking charge of its own business in the way and manner we deem appropriate for our context. This is really very exciting, and I will look forward to Afra concluding this process and engaging with the stakeholders. You know, you talked about the payment system that is either local currency or USD. Fortunately, there's the African Import-Export Bank has come up with a payment solution that allows you to move African currencies between countries in those countries' respective currencies, which is also a good thing. And I think going forward, I hope this solution coming up is embedding this solution into it in terms of payment. So the movement of currency, you sell in Kenya and you are a Nigerian operator, you should be able to receive your money back in Lagos in Naira instead of Kenya shilling, where you are struggling to get USD. Or you sell in Ghana from Kenya, you should be able to get your money back to Ghana in Ghana City instead of waiting to get the USD to move your funds. This way, we'll be able to move our funds across pretty quickly and be able to get our industry in charge, get in charge of our own industry and take charge. Now, allow me at this point to go to our Q&A box and review some of the questions that are coming in. Hassan Orelk, my good friend, says, are online travel agents never members of Travel Agency Association? If not, why not? Is there a reason why online agencies have never been part of Travel Agency Association? And do you know why? That's the question.
I'll populate, you know, 3 reasons. One, a lot of these OTAs are global in nature, so they are not domesticated. So some of them really struggle, you know, in terms of how they can be part. And I know some of them are starting to join our global, you know, Travel Agents Association to be part of that. But a lot of us are still, we're not seeing them locally, though we can see their presence, you know, virtually. Number 2, let's also face it. We haven't been too friendly, you know, for the OTAs, particularly because of the manner they were coming in and the initial threats that they posed, you know, to a lot of our industry. And I think a lot of local associations were a little bit not so sure, of the intent. So many of them then were not open, to invite them into the association because of that fear of just not knowing if they're going to cannibalize them or what sort of like relationship they would have. But thirdly, I think it's much more important for these OTAs to make efforts to want to be part of the local entity so that they can also understand local contexts of how the business works. So I will postulate that those could be the three reasons why we haven't seen a lot of them, participate.
Thank you for that. There's an anonymous guest who is asking, what do you require to be a travel agent in Kenya? I think this one will reserve it. Please, you can contact Nick on the side, but the agency requirements are not dictated by CATA. If you want to be a registered agent, you need to contact IATA for the details of what to become a travel agent. He also wants to know about difficulties faced by travel agents. I think let's try and really explore where this industry is headed rather than focusing on what will hold us back. We'll review that in subsequent discussions. But Mandeep is asking, are any agents using voice AI chat box for inbound calls from clients globally? I mean, I think the context is from Kenya, from a Kenya perspective. Are any of your members using chat box to communicate with your client?
It's not a pervasive, it's not pervasive, but based on the size, the interest, the focus of what a travel agency they will do. So the big one definitely that handle multiple clients globally with global accounts, they will definitely be having that sort of investment. But again, this points to what I was telling you, Rafael. Some of these technologies, they are not homemade. They are sold in US dollars, they are sold in euros. And they don't come cheap. You need to subscribe, then you need to buy the technology, then you need to maintain it, and the costs just keep on adding. So some of them are not very supportive for local businesses because of the prohibitive costs that are actually required to be able to install them and use them. But I guess that's one of the challenges we'll give to our local developers. How do we develop such technologies at a price point that is convenient but also appropriate to our local context?
Okay, great, thank you. Now, Chinelo is asking, do you have the challenges that Nigeria faces where it is cheaper to buy in Kenya, to buy Kenya UK tickets, for instance, from outside of Kenya?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, is it yes or no? Is yes or no in just one?
No, we do. We do. Yeah. And I think that's the biggest problem we are struggling with as Africa. And I'll be very honest, it's a conversation we are seriously having, even within our regional association, our regional association, because we must find a mechanism to be able to protect and ring fence some of these local businesses. Otherwise, we're also going to see a lot of cannibalization happening. People getting advantage because they have access to cheaper technologies, they have access to sophisticated technologies that are able to scan around, get those tickets and issue them, from outside your destination. Yeah. But I think what we're also arguing is that it is not good for local economies, because it definitely denies local economies an opportunity to be able to grow. And it's something that collectively across the continent, we are looking at how do we safeguard, our own travel. But we also must be alive to the fact that technology has come. The world has become a global village. So some of these things will continue to disrupt the way we have to do our business, and therefore we also need to see how we adapt and stay ahead, of competition.
I like that. Yeah, we need to accept the reality that technology is here to stay, and it's either we become part of it, or technology moves others ahead of us, and we know the consequences. Now, let's go on to one of the offshoots of technology, and this is product unbundling. We are seeing increasingly that technology is now allowing us to strip the product that we sell. In the past, you just say from point A to point B is X amount. And it's all inclusive. A meal, it includes your check bag, it includes everything. Today, you have the option to buy just your seat without a meal. You have the option to buy your seat without a checked bag. So if you are checking in a bag, if you are not checking in a bag. So now the technology is allowing us to do this. Would you say this is a good thing for the travel agents community?
Absolutely. And I think for me, that's the beauty about technology, because it makes the impossible possible. A couple of years ago, you can imagine, you go onto a plane and you don't have a meal. If I remember the first time I traveled on a low-cost carrier, and I sat there waiting, for a meal to come, and these guys were pushing around food and they wanted me to buy. It was ridiculous. What do you mean? I paid quite a good amount for a ticket. Now you want me to buy my own food online. It was a huge conversation. But with this unbundling, I think what you're calling the unbundling of the ancillary, it means that actually now you are able to sell more, but also you are able to respond to the preferences of your clients. Rafael Kuchi, he likes his red wine served in this kind of thing. This is a seat he requires. His baggage, he's a heavy traveler. He travels heavy, so I need to be able to factor in that. Vis-a-vis Nicanor, who I would stay on a plane without eating anything. I travel light, so I don't watch TV, but I love to be on online, through internet, browsing. That give me that as opposed to food, So what that does, it democratizes the desire of and meets the preferences of that traveler. So you're able to serve your traveler much more better, and selling extra. And that's why I was talking about a travel agent as now an advisor. So I'll look at you and I'll tell you, Rafael, the seat you are choosing is not good for your health, because I know you. Maybe I would prefer you sit here. But because of your price point, maybe because you cannot go into the business class, I'll give you a premium economy, and you'll be able to get everything you want at a premium economy seat. So what that does mean, more opportunities, more things to sell. We are no longer just selling a seat on a plane, but we are selling an experience during your travel. And that's the beauty about that, personalization of offerings on the plane.
So now with this and with the constant changes that we are experiencing in the industry, there's so much fluidity requiring that you have staff and employees who are well-trained, very adaptable, very agile to the evolving trends. How does the travel agency community build and retain capacity in the business?
It's a very good question, and it is a good question because COVID appended, a structure in the industry. I've also had my colleagues from the airlines speak about the same, and as a result, we've seen the changes, in terms of the capacity available to serve the industry. A good thing, a couple of them went started their own business, good for them. And then pre-COVID, we're also seeing changing needs. We are seeing the introduction of these new technologies, the NDCs and all these things. But if you look at our training manuals in our training schools, it's still old-fashioned. They are yet to catch up. So that has created a capacity challenge in the industry. So for us to be able to prepare a future-ready industry, we must be ready to invest in building the capacity of the people that we want to work in the industry. And that's why it's important for us to bend backwards and go and begin building collaborations with our training institutions so that the academia is actually responding to the needs of the modern traveler and therefore the desires of a travel agent that actually are very modern. So there's a very huge need for industry to work very closely with the academia to ensure that we are training people that are capable of the industry of tomorrow. You know,
but I guess that is not happening today. Is there a conversation going on trying to get this industry academia collaboration going?
I think the conversation is there, Rafael, and I'll be very honest. We are talking about it. Whether we are doing it is the other question. But I know for us, for instance, as CATA, you know, from a Kenya Association of Travel Agents, we have been very deliberate. We've built a program we are calling the CATA Future Leaders Program. Right. Okay. And what that entails is that we're working very closely with our training institutions to ensure that we are also creating mentorship. We are helping these colleges to be equipped with the latest technology. And once these students are trained, we are making effort to be able to absorb them and offer them long-term internships so that they can be able to be upskilled. Now, when that happens, you have an industry that has capacity to be able to serve you not only for today, but also for the future. But also you're securing and creating an industry that is future ready. So we must be able to walk the talk.
The talk. Great. We must walk the talk. And we also would be pleading with our governments, the airlines, and all who are in the travel space to collaboratively work towards building capacity, because this industry is going nowhere, and the stronger the expertise we have in the industry is, the more sustainable these businesses will continue to be, and the better they can support our airlines and the aviation community in general. Now let me get to data ownership and data protection before we wind down our discussion. We have just about 8 minutes, so if you can briefly respond to these ones for me, I'll be much appreciated. You know that today there's proliferation of data regulations coming up from literally every country. Particularly the Western world have come up with very strong data protection and data management regulations, ensuring that passenger data or the customer data are well protected and to avoid abuse. Now, I'm not too sure as travel agents, the debate has always been on who owns the data. But now the ownership of the data as against the control of the data and the use of the data, it's quite a tricky one. So in the travel agency community, how are you guys dealing with this? Because you often is said the travel agent is an agent of the principal, which is the airline. And so if there's any data abuse, then the principal is the one held liable. But as an agent, what is your role and how are you dealing with the complexities of data ownership, management, and control?
Good. You know, when I was joining this industry, Raphael, about 10 years ago, that was a very heated conversation that was very uncomfortable to engage in, because remember that time is when we shifted to e-tickets, and therefore there's a lot of data that was required. And traditionally, when you went back, a lot of that data stayed. The traveler data stayed with the travel agent because they were the primary custodian of the data, and what the airlines were doing literally was just to be able to service this client that the travel agent had brought to them. So they had absolutely no access to the data of the traveler. Their role was to transport the traveler from point A to point B. Don't ask questions. You understand? On the other hand, the airlines were fighting back and saying, this is our client. We need to understand. There are disruptions that are happening. We need to reach out to them and be able to update them about what is happening. We need to find a mechanism of offering them quality service because they are our client. And so the more push and pull was so strong. And in the modern world, as I say, oil has become, data has become the new oil. He who controls the data controls the business. And for me, the debate on who owns the data is really a debate that should not be there. That data is owned by the traveler. It is their data. It is theirs. Both us and the airlines, we're just custodians of that data. That data is entrusted to us to be able to help to support this client have an experience, while traveling, So in my opinion, it is not a question of who owns the data, but how do we attend to this data? How do we manage this data? All right. So if we handle the data responsibly, I believe it becomes a very powerful tool for us to innovate. Because then you're able to be, when you're deploying your predictive analysis, it's easier. You're looking at preferences of the traveler. It's easier for you to model and offer great service to this traveler. However, if we misuse, if we mishandle, if we play around with this data, then there's a risk. We are going to lose the trust of this consumer, and hence we begin to lose our customer because they cannot trust us with their data. And therefore, it is important that we comply with the data. I think we have started very, very strongly to advocate for compliance here amongst our members as Kenya. And it's good for me, in my opinion, that these data protection laws, have been employed here because it's the way to go. Yeah. So let's stop the conversation on who owns the data, but let's see how responsible we can be able to manage that data, knowing that we are custodians. We are just custodians of the data.
Wow, that's a very good point to end on data protection and management. Let's see, how do we protect this data and how do we use it creatively to grow and nurture our businesses. Nick, before I let you go, I want you to tell me, how do we position travel agents in Africa for the future? Because the future is still evolving and we haven't seen the end of the technology transition yet. Now, going into the future, how is Qatar positioning itself, and how do you see, particularly in Africa, travel agencies positioning themselves to maintain their relevance going forward?
About collaboration. The opportunities in Africa are immense, huge, the next frontier of growth. But these opportunities can only be harnessed if there's much more collaboration. Africa is a vast continent, and we are seeing, the growth of intra-Africa travel and trade. The FCFTA, we're talking about CETA. All these are enablers of travel across the continent. but the continent will remain to be a very vast continent. Now, for us to be able to offer effective, to be able to offer quality service to our client, we need to find collaboration. And with the diversity in Africa, there's everything for everybody. So how do we ensure that the experiences I have in Lagos, and I am moving to Dakar, I'm moving to Nairobi, I'm moving to Harare. How do we harmonize those, experiences? And we as travel agents, remember, are intermediaries. We have to be able to provide connection. So we cannot provide that connection if we don't collaborate. So my message will be, let's collaborate more. Let's explore the continent. Let's collectively market and sell the continent. After all, outside there in the Western world, they say that they are visiting Africa as if it's a country because we are a long-haul destination. So we must be able to find mechanism of doing joint marketing and collaborating much more. We must cooperate more than compete as Africans, because that's where the opportunity lies.
Collaboration rather than competition. Our time is up. We have a number of messages that have come in. Unfortunately, we cannot take the messages. Safe to say that our messages are coming from Alfred Walili, Ahmed Oluodu, and Madip Berdi, as well as Patrick Kamanga and Hassan Oreg. They've all made comments, largely to the extent that they're happy to hear that the travel agency business is going nowhere and that it will continue to thrive and continue to grow and prosper. They're very grateful for that reassurance. We also have two other questions, which unfortunately time will not allow us to take from Hassan and Ahmed Oluodu, but we would leave those ones to respond to in the future. But before I let you go, as I always give an opportunity to my guest to give me a final message, what would be your parting shot to our audience who are still glued to their screens and watching us?
Mine is a reassurance. Technology is not replacing travel agents. It is, however, empowering us. And the future of African aviation lies in our collaboration. Our airlines need to innovate. Our agents need to adapt and adapt so quickly. Our governments need to be able to harmonize our policies and allow us to be able to have a conducive environment. But above all, the customer, our client, has to be at the center of it all. We must be able to place the customer at the center of everything that we do, because they are the ones that matter and are the ones that are going to keep us in business. Thank you, Rafael.
Wow. On that powerful note, technology is not replacing travel agents. Collaboration is the way to go so that we can empower ourselves and serve our clients even better. Thank you very much, Mr. Nicanor Sambula, for taking time off your busy schedule to be with us today and to give us the reassurance that our travel industry will continue to grow from strength to strength. The travel agents are irreplaceable and they will continue to play a vital role in linking people to airlines and getting the businesses moving. To our audience who have joined us, we thank you very much for your time and for participating in today's session. And we look forward to seeing you again next month on another edition of AfraSky Connect. Until then, I thank you so much for your time and thank you for joining. Thanks so much to all those who have made contributions through comments or who have asked questions. Unfortunately, my apologies, we could not take all the questions, but we do appreciate your participation. And thank you very much. And until we meet again, I wish you all a very pleasant day. Bye-bye for now.
Thank you.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
Nick.